The city had been suffocating lately. Smoke-stained air, honking cars, endless deadlines. It felt like a prison without walls. Lena slammed her laptop shut and glanced at her friends, who were already packed into Jake's old SUV, their excitement barely contained. "We're going to Blackwood Forest," Mark announced, a grin splitting his face. "No Wi-Fi, no stress, just us and nature." Lena felt a shiver of anticipation. The forest was notorious, dense, ancient, and said to be haunted by the kind of shadows that made even local hikers uneasy. But that was exactly why she wanted to go. Adventure, escape, a story to tell. The drive was long, winding through countryside roads that seemed forgotten by time. As the SUV bumped along, Sarah rolled down her window and breathed in the crisp air, letting the smell of pine and damp earth fill her lungs. "It's unreal," she whispered, almost to herself. "Too unreal," Lena muttered, scanning the tree line. The forest loomed ahead, dark and endless, its canopy blotting out the sky in places. It wasn't menacing, at least not yet, but something about the shadows between the trees made her stomach tighten. Jake, ever the optimist, laughed. "Relax, trees don't bite. It's just wood and leaves." Mark glanced at Lena, noticing her unease. "It's fine. We'll be fine. Come on, it's just a weekend. You'll love it once we're settled." They found a clearing near the lake just as the sun began its slow descent. Golden light streamed across the water, shimmering against the reeds. Birds chirped and the wind whispered softly through the branches. Lena forced herself to smile. The forest, at first glance, seemed inviting, a sanctuary from the chaos of city life. The friends set up their tents quickly, their laughter echoing across the clearing. They unpacked food and camping gear, lighting a fire that crackled to life. Shadows danced in the flickering light, and the forest seemed to hold its breath. Lena noticed, almost subconsciously, a thin set of footprints leading toward the lake, but she dismissed it as an animal passing by. As night fell, the atmosphere shifted imperceptibly. The air grew cooler, the wind sharper. Strange sounds carried across the water, twigs snapping, leaves rustling, but no wind seemed to stir them. Sarah, already jittery, pointed toward a movement at the tree line. "Did you see that?" she asked. Her voice trembled slightly. "See what?" Jake replied, but he didn't look. He was busy starting a small campfire, tossing twigs into the flames. "Nothing," Lena said quickly, though her eyes remained fixed on the shadows. For a moment, she thought she glimpsed a figure standing just beyond the edge of the firelight, a silhouette darker than the darkness itself. But when she blinked, it was gone. "Probably just a deer," Mark said, though his voice lacked conviction. They tried to brush it off and gather round the fire. As night deepened, Lena suggested they tell scary stories to pass the time. She figured laughter would break the tension, but the stories quickly took a dark turn. Mark spoke of missing hikers, tales of travelers vanishing in Blackwood Forest without a trace. Sarah shivered. Even Jake, who rarely felt fear, glanced uneasily at the trees. Then came the first scream. It wasn't loud, more like a startled cry carried through the trees, but it froze them all in place. The sound seemed impossibly close, yet impossibly far, echoing from deep within the forest. Lena's heart hammered. That wasn't one of us," she whispered. "Probably just an animal," Jake said, though the edge in his voice betrayed his doubt. The group fell silent, listening. The wind rustled through the canopy, carrying with it another sound, soft footsteps, deliberate, pacing just beyond the firelight. Lena's eyes darted to the tree line. Nothing, but the hairs on her neck stood on end. Then Lena noticed it, a symbol carved at the base of a nearby tree. At first, she thought it was just natural grooves in the bark. But no, someone or something had etched a triangle with a vertical line through it. Her stomach dropped. What is that?" she asked, pointing. Mark leaned closer, squinting. "Probably just some old hiker's mark, nothing to worry about." But Lena wasn't convinced. There was a precision in the carving, deliberate and intentional. Someone had been here, and they were watching. They tried to laugh it off, but unease clung to them like a shadow. Lena felt eyes on her, a prickling sensation crawling across her skin. She kept glancing over her shoulder, expecting to see the figure again, but the darkness held only trees. As midnight approached, their conversation dwindled. Sarah, unable to shake the tension, suggested turning in. They crawled into their tents, the thin walls offering little comfort. Lena lay awake, listening. Every snap of a branch, every rustle of leaves made her pulse race. She wanted to believe it was just the forest, foxes, deer, owls, but deep down she knew something was wrong. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. In the forest, time felt distorted. Then came a whisper, soft, almost inaudible. "Go now." Lena froze. Her blood ran cold. She shook Mark awake, whispering what she heard. "What?" he murmured, groggy. I thought I heard someone or something." Before he could respond, a branch snapped outside the tent, followed by another, then another. The sequence wasn't random. It was deliberate, approaching our campsite. Lena clutched her sleeping bag like a shield. Sarah whimpered. Jake grabbed a flashlight, flicking it on, the beam slicing through the blackness. The forest held its secrets tight, revealing nothing but swirling mist, tangled roots, and gnarled branches. And then, silence. Lena exhaled, heart racing. Maybe it's gone." Mark didn't answer. He was staring at something the others couldn't see, and for a fleeting second, Lena thought she saw the dark silhouette of a figure standing just beyond the firelight, its eyes reflecting faintly in the moonlight. Then it was gone. By dawn, the group awoke to the forest bathed in pale gray light. The fire had died and the campsite was disturbed, footprints around their tents, food scattered, and one of Jake's hiking boots missing. Nothing else. "Maybe a wild animal," Jake suggested weakly. But Lena wasn't fooled. The forest had already shown them it wasn't safe. Something was lurking, patient, intelligent, and watching, and they were already trapped. The weekend that was supposed to be an escape had become something far darker. By morning, the forest seemed even less welcoming. Mist clung to the ground like a living thing, curling around the roots and stones, softening sounds but amplifying the fear in their hearts. Lena rubbed her eyes, trying to shake the unease that had settled over her like a heavy cloak. The previous night had left a mark, a cold reminder that the forest was not empty. Jake fumbled for his missing boot, found it half buried in mud near the edge of the campsite. "Animals," he muttered, but the hesitation in his voice betrayed him. "Animals don't carve symbols," Lena said sharply, gesturing toward the eerie triangle scratched into the tree the night before. Mark shot her a glance, uneasy. "Let's just pack up and head back to the main road," he suggested. "Maybe the fog will lift by midday and we can navigate out." But the forest had its own rules. Paths twisted unnaturally, familiar landmarks seemed to vanish, and every tree they passed looked identical to the last. The further they walked, the more the mist thickened, wrapping around their legs like the cold fingers of some unseen hand. Sarah shivered and whispered, "I feel like something is watching us." "You're not wrong," Lena said, scanning the tree line. "But we can't see it yet. It knows we're here." Hours passed. The sun rose higher, but the fog never lifted. Signs of intrusion became impossible to ignore. Backpacks slightly moved, footprints that didn't belong to any of them, and broken branches forming paths that seemed too deliberate to be natural. Lena's heart pounded in her chest. The forest was no longer neutral. It had become a labyrinth designed to trap them. Then it happened. Jake, who had been walking ahead to scout the path, vanished. One moment he was there, the next gone. Lena screamed his name, her voice cracking with panic. Sarah grabbed Mark's arm. "He didn't just disappear, did he?" They rushed to where Jake had last stood. The only signs of him were footprints leading into a dense thicket, then stopping abruptly. No branches were broken, no leaves disturbed beyond the trail. It was as if he had been lifted off the ground. Panic gripped them all. "Jake!" Lena screamed again. "Where are you?" No answer came, only the distant sound of water trickling and the whisper of wind through the pines. They had no choice but to continue cautiously, hoping he was just hiding, maybe trapped in a narrow gully or caught in the underbrush. As they pressed forward, the forest itself seemed to turn against them. Mist thickened in unnatural patterns, twisting and curling around their feet. Shadows moved just beyond the range of their vision, darker than the dim light, following their every step. Each snap of a twig made them jump. Each rustle of leaves made them freeze. The predator, or whatever it was no longer just a watcher. It was an active force, herding them deeper into the forest. Hours of frantic wandering led them to a clearing that chilled them to the bone. The remnants of previous victims were scattered there, abandoned tents, torn clothing, and a half-buried journal. Lena picked it up with trembling hands. The entries were fragmented but unmistakable. Hikers had come here, disappeared, and something had followed them silently, learning, observing, feeding on fear before striking. Mark turned pale. "We're not the first," he said, voice barely audible. "You mean we're not the last either," Lena replied, her throat dry. They debated splitting up, sending one person ahead to find a way out, but the forest seemed to punish such thoughts. Every time one of them suggested it, a shadow shifted in the corner of their vision, a branch snapped near them, or a whisper echoed their hesitation back at them. The forest itself was teaching them a lesson: stay together or risk being hunted one by one. By late afternoon, exhaustion set in. Their stomachs grumbled, blisters burned their feet, and every movement felt like a gamble. Then, suddenly, Sarah froze. She pointed to a tree, pale as paper. "Look, footprints!" Lena stepped closer. The prints were huge, larger than any humans, and strangely shaped, like a distorted combination of clawed hands and feet. They moved in a deliberate path, circling their position before leading deeper into the fog. "Something is mocking us," Lena muttered. "It's leading us somewhere, maybe even to Jake." Before Mark could respond, a voice echoed through the trees, not human, but chillingly articulate. "Don't follow." The whisper was carried by the wind, yet every hair on their bodies stood on end. Panic surged. Lena gripped Sarah's hand. "We have to find him," she said. They followed the footprints, stepping carefully through the undergrowth. Soon they found Jake, huddled in a shallow depression, his eyes wide, his clothes torn and smeared with mud. He babbled incoherently about how the forest moves and watches, how a figure stalked him silently, always just out of reach. "We have to leave," Mark said urgently. "Now!" But the forest refused to let them go. Every path they tried seemed to loop back, every landmark repeated, and the mist thickened with each step. Lena noticed markings on the trees, symbols carved into the bark, triangular shapes with jagged lines intersecting them. They weren't random, they were warnings or traps. Night fell again, swallowing the clearing in darkness. The friends tried to build a fire, but branches snapped nearby, the shadows flickering in ways that defied the light. Then came the first attack, small, quick, deliberate. A branch shot out from the darkness, striking Lena's shoulder. She cried out, spinning around, but nothing was there. Sarah screamed, tripping over roots in her panic. Mark grabbed Sarah, pulling her upright. "It's testing us," he said grimly. "It wants us afraid. It wants us scattered." The psychological assault was worse than anything physical. Every whisper, every shadow, every subtle movement of the fog seemed to taunt them. Lena realized the predator didn't need to strike immediately. It thrived on terror, feeding on the fear that clung to their minds like poison. Finally, they stumbled upon a natural cave hidden behind dense foliage, a small refuge for the night. They collapsed inside, shivering, battered, and exhausted. Outside, the forest breathed, alive with movement, unseen eyes watching, listening, waiting. Jake, trembling, whispered something that made Lena's stomach turn. It knows what scares us most. The friends huddled together, the firelight from their meager lantern flickering on the damp cave walls. None of them slept. Every shadow outside felt like a hand reaching in, every distant noise a promise of danger. They had come seeking safety, but the forest had only revealed its truth. It was never safe, and whatever waited in the shadows was patient. The cave offered a fragile sense of shelter, but it was a poor barrier against the forest outside. Every crack in the stone seemed to amplify sounds, snapping twigs, rustling leaves, distant growls. Lena's mind raced as she tried to piece together their next move: stay in the cave and risk being trapped, or venture back into the forest with no guarantee of escape. Jake trembled beside her, whispering fragments of his encounter. It knows. It watches. It learns. His eyes were wide with terror, unblinking, and every word sent shivers down Lena's spine. Mark paced the cave, fists clenched. "We can't just wait. It's going to come for us eventually. We need a plan." Sarah, still pale from her earlier panic, shivered. "We don't even know what it is. How can we fight it?" Lena exhaled slowly, forcing herself to focus. "We don't fight it," she said. "We survive it. We stay together. We outsmart it." With the faintest glow of dawn seeping through the cave entrance, they stepped out, scanning the misty forest. The landscape seemed different now, as if the trees themselves had shifted overnight. Every path they tried to take appeared to circle back to the same cursed clearing, every landmark repeating itself like a cruel illusion. And then they saw it. At first, it was just a shadow, slipping silently between the pines. Then the shape solidified, a hulking figure, taller than any human, partially obscured by tattered rags that blended perfectly with the darkness. Its movements were slow, deliberate, almost ritualistic. Lena froze, her heart hammering in her chest. The predator wasn't just hiding, it was stalking them, letting them know it was there. Sarah gasped. It's real." Jake shook violently. "I told you, it's not human. It's something else." Mark raised a trembling hand. "We move. Quietly. Stay close." Every step through the undergrowth was agonizing. The predator followed, unseen but omnipresent. Occasionally it would strike in subtle ways, a branch snapping near Lena's foot, a stone tossed to land just behind them, a distant whisper of a name. It was testing their fear, measuring their reactions, feeding on it. By mid-afternoon, exhaustion and hunger gnawed at them. The forest seemed endless, each step heavier than the last. Lena noticed faint trails of blood, small scratches, possibly from other victims. Her stomach churned, but she kept her focus. Survival required control, not panic. Then came the first real confrontation. A clearing opened ahead, small, almost serene, with a fallen log lying across the ground. They approached cautiously, and Lena froze. The predator was there, still partially cloaked in shadow, yet unmistakably humanoid, with pale, weathered skin and eyes that reflected a cunning intelligence. It didn't charge. It didn't roar. It simply watched, its gaze piercing, analyzing. Jake's foot slipped on wet moss, and the predator moved like a coiled spring, a blur of motion so fast it was almost invisible. Jake screamed, and Lena lunged, grabbing his arm and dragging him behind a tree. The predator paused, tilting his head as if curious, then retreated into the forest. "It's playing with us," Lena whispered. "It wants us scared before it strikes." Mark nodded grimly. "We have to fight fear with strategy. We can't let it control us." The next hours became a deadly game of cat and mouse. Lena suggested setting small traps, tripwires, flare sticks, and false trails to mislead it. They moved cautiously, each step measured. The predator followed, learning, adapting. When one trap triggered, it would retreat, then return moments later, testing them again. The forest became a battlefield of fear and strategy. Jake, despite his trauma, offered insight. "It watches how we react. If we panic, it knows exactly what to do. If we act calm, it hesitates." Lena realized something chilling. They were no longer in control of their own escape. Every path, every step was being manipulated. The forest was a weapon in the predator's hands. Night approached once more, darker than before. The mist rolled in thick and suffocating. They had no choice but to make camp near a narrow cliffside overlooking the lake, a natural bottleneck where they might have a chance to corner the predator. As they built a small fire, Lena's eyes darted constantly, scanning the tree line. Shadows moved unnaturally. A twig snapped just beyond the firelight. The predator emerged, partially visible, and for the first time they saw the full grotesque detail of its form. Tall, disheveled, its limbs disproportionate, its eyes glowing faintly, almost sentient. It didn't attack immediately. Instead, it circled, slow, deliberate, taunting. Lena clenched her fists. "We need to stay together. No one moves alone." The predator made a sudden rush toward the fire, too fast for them to react fully. Sarah screamed, ducking behind a boulder. Mark threw a flare, temporarily blinding it. In that instant, Lena grabbed a fallen branch, swinging it as hard as she could. The creature staggered back, emitting a sound that was part growl, part human scream. For a brief moment, hope surged. They had struck back. But the predator wasn't defeated. It retreated, disappearing into the forest, but not before leaving a final warning. It let out a low, guttural hiss that echoed through the trees, promising this was far from over. The group huddled together, adrenaline surging but exhaustion overwhelming. Lena looked at her friends' faces, pale, terrified, yet resolute. "Tomorrow," she said softly, "we find a way out. No more running, no more mistakes." Jake's voice trembled. It's learning from us. Every step we take, it knows." Lena nodded grimly. "Then we use that against it. We survive, or it wins." The night dragged on, every shadow a threat, every rustle a potential attack. The forest had revealed itself fully. It was alive, intelligent, and merciless, and the predator was the forest's most cunning predator, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. As they drifted into a fitful sleep, huddled against the cold cliffside, Lena felt a hand of dread tighten around her chest. The forest wasn't finished with them, not yet. And when dawn came, the hunt would resume, with no guarantees of survival. Dawn broke over Blackwood Forest, though the pale light did little to ease the tension. Mist still clung to the ground like a living thing, curling around the roots and gnarled tree trunks. Lena, Mark, Sarah, and Jake huddled near the cliffside, exhausted, cold, and battered from the predator's relentless hunt. Each of them bore scratches, bruises, and the invisible scars of terror, the kind that burrows into your mind, making every shadow suspect. "This is it," Lena whispered, her voice taut. "We make a break for the main road. No stopping, no mistakes." Jake shivered. It's waiting. It knows." Lena met his gaze. "Then we use that. It's smart, yes, but so are we. Stick close, trust each other." The forest seemed almost sentient as they moved, twisting paths that should have led straight to safety, now bending back upon themselves. Each step required vigilance. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves was a reminder that the predator was still there, watching, learning, calculating. As they descended a narrow trail toward the outer edge of the forest, a low growl rumbled from somewhere in the mist. Lena froze, signaling the others to halt. There it was again, the predator, moving among the trees with a grace that belied its size. Its glowing eyes pierced the fog, unwavering, fixated. "We have to run, now," Mark whispered. They bolted, legs burning, hearts hammering. The predator surged after them, fast and silent, a shadow among shadows. Lena glanced back and saw its grotesque, hulking form weaving between the trees, an almost human figure cloaked in darkness. The forest seemed to conspire with it, roots and fallen logs tripping them, thick undergrowth slowing their progress, fog obscuring every landmark. Halfway down the slope, Lena stumbled. Sarah caught her, and together they scrambled forward. Behind them, a branch snapped, a warning, a threat, a challenge. Jake, lagging slightly, cried out as a jagged claw-like hand swiped past him. He fell forward but scrambled back onto his feet. They reached a narrow creek, water rushing over stones slick with moss. Lena realized this was their chance. The creek led toward the main road. If they could keep moving, keep the predator at a distance, they might just make it. The predator emerged from the mist fully, its hulking figure now unmistakable. It let out a low, guttural sound, part growl, part human scream, that made every hair on their bodies stand on end. But it did not rush them immediately. Instead, it stalked the edge of the creek, circling them like a predator assessing prey. Lena took a deep breath. Stick close, stay low, and move fast. Step by step, they navigated the treacherous terrain. Lena led the way, stepping carefully over rocks and tangled roots. Mark beside her, Sarah gripping his arm, and Jake trailing but moving steadily. Every snap, every hiss of air through the trees was a potential attack. Suddenly, the predator lunged. Its movement was blindingly fast, faster than human perception. Lena grabbed a large branch and swung at it, striking its shoulder. The creature staggered but did not fall, emitting a low, echoing scream that seemed to vibrate through the forest itself. The momentary distraction was enough. Mark grabbed Sarah's hand, pulling her forward, and Lena yanked Jake along. They splashed into the creek, water surging around their legs, making every step precarious, but also giving them momentum. The predator hesitated at the edge of the creek, snarling, watching as its prey fled. Its patience was immense, its strategy clear. It did not need to strike now. The forest was its ally, and it would wait, it would adapt, it would strike again if given the chance. Hours seemed to stretch into eternity as they followed the creek, the mist finally thinning. The sound of tires on gravel in the distance sparked hope. The main road, salvation. But the predator was relentless. It leaped from the shadows onto the trail ahead, forcing them to stop abruptly. Lena, thinking fast, grabbed a fallen log and hurled it with all her strength, creating a temporary blockade. Mark seized the moment to push Sarah forward, while Lena and Jake made a dash around the predator's flank. A tense sequence of misdirection and survival ensued, shouting, running, dodging the forest's natural obstacles, and narrowly avoiding the predator's grasp. Lena felt her heart pound so hard it hurt. Every second was a gamble. One misstep could be the last. Finally, the forest thinned and the main road came into view. Headlights appeared from a distant vehicle, an approaching park ranger checking trails for hikers. Relief surged. They ran straight into the road, waving frantically. The vehicle skidded to a halt. A uniformed ranger leapt out, eyes wide. "Are you okay?" Lena struggled for words. "We were attacked, chased by something in the forest." The ranger's gaze fell behind them to the tree line. Mist rolled across the ground, and for a heartbeat, Lena thought she saw a dark figure watching silently from the shadows, then disappear among the trees. They were loaded into the vehicle, shivering, traumatized, and in shock. The forest stretched behind them, silent now, but Lena knew it had not given up. Jake leaned back, pale and exhausted. "Do you think it's still there?" Lena swallowed hard. "It doesn't need to be gone. It never leaves." Mark placed a hand on her shoulder. "We survived. That's what matters." But the forest, vast and ancient, and the predator that called it home, remained, watching, waiting, patient. The ranger drove them toward safety, the lights cutting through the morning fog. They didn't speak much. Words were inadequate for the horrors they had witnessed. Each of them was changed, marked by the terror that had stalked them through Blackwood Forest. And deep in the woods, the predator retreated to the shadows, silent, calculating, its presence an eternal threat. The weekend getaway that had promised peace, laughter, and adventure had turned into a nightmare. The forest had won in subtle ways, testing, hunting, and teaching fear in its purest form. Lena stared out the window as the trees receded, her mind unwilling to forget the glowing eyes, the hulking shadow, the whispered warnings. They had survived, but they would never be the same. Blackwood Forest remained behind them, but its darkness lingered, and somewhere, waiting for the next unwary souls, the predator bided its time.